Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name's Chelsea if this is your first time here. I am a stay-at-home mom to a 2-year-old boy named Sebastian and also a 4-month-old little boy named Matteo. Today is going to be my birth story on having Matteo, which was an unmedicated Vbac. Vbac stands for vaginal birth after C-section. This story is something that I'm obviously 4 months postpartum at this point, and I've wanted to record this. Things have been a little bit crazy. Obviously I had 2 under 2, and now Sebastian is 2 years old, and now it's 2 and under. And I absolutely love it, but I really wanted to share this story to kind of give hope to the people that have had a C-section and for their first, but were unable to have a vaginal delivery with their first child or second or third, and are now hoping to have a Vbac or the chance of having a Vbac after having that C-section. So this is my birth story with having Matteo. So this pregnancy with Matteo was a little bit difficult for me. I stopped doing my monthly updates or weekly updates back when I was about 24, 25 weeks, and things got a little difficult for me with the pain. I did have some weight from my first pregnancy still on, so I felt very heavy. I got tired very quickly, and when my 2-year-old was sleeping, at the time he was 21 months old, I would generally take a nap and just kind of rest while I could before entering the world of being a mother to a newborn again. So this story starts on May 17th, 2019. Matteo Sander Arietta was born, and this little boy has been a light to our world. Obviously having one little boy has been absolutely amazing, and Sebastian is such a good boy, and to have added another little boy to our family of 4 has just been perfection. May 17th is also my mother's birthday. So that morning, Sebastian and I went to breakfast slash lunch with my mom for her birthday. And so we went and had breakfast, and we went shopping at kind of like a consignment for children. And we communicate daily with family on the app called Marco Polo. And we got on that app after going shopping at the consignment store, and I kind of looked at my mom and I told our family, our immediate family, I don't think I'm having this baby today. At this point it was probably 12:30, 1 o'clock, and I said, I don't think I'm having this baby today. I'm feeling fine. Everything feels normal with Sebastian. I had contractions the night before I actually had my water break and went into labor, and I was feeling totally normal with this pregnancy with Matteo, and I was 38 weeks to the day. So we get off of Marco Polo, and I'm just joking around with my mom, like, I'm sorry, I don't think he's gonna come in the next 12 hours. I know you really wanted to have him on your birthday, but I don't think it's happening. So fast forward to getting home, putting Sebastian down for his nap, and I also laid down. And I woke up at 3:55 p.m. on May 17th and started having contractions. And the contractions, initially I knew that they were contractions, but for whatever reason, I honestly thought that, maybe I'm just having pains. They're not going to be consistent. I had been having Braxton Hicks contractions for weeks. And I started to have these contractions, and I'm like, wow, they're coming every 5 minutes. And I was starting to kind of have a progression of pain. And I started to keep track of my contractions, and I was kind of trying to pace the house and walk around and see if movement kind of stopped the contractions, because with Braxton Hicks, you can have contractions, but with movement, consumption of water, maybe eating something, you start to feel a little bit better and maybe normal, and you won't actually have these contractions anymore. But mine were very regular. I was using an app to time them and keep track of them. And at 5 o'clock, my husband got home, and I was FaceTiming with my mom at that point, and I said, I'm having trouble kind of breathing through these contractions and actually continuing on doing the activities that I was doing around the house. I think that I may be going into labor with Matteo. And she said, are you able to take care of your family right now? If they needed you to be not seated on the couch, but doing something, if you were cooking dinner or what have you around the house, would you be able to take care of them? And I said no. And she said, you need to call your provider. And granted, this was only an hour of contractions. So my husband got home, got into the shower, and we kind of packed everything up. We did have the bags ready to go, but just the last minute things that I still kind of had in the bathroom that I use on a daily basis, and everything that I wanted to be able to have in the hospital. And I called the doctor's office, and of course at this point it's after 5 o'clock, so they're closed. And they said, okay, the on-call is going to call you back. And unfortunately the on-call was not my doctor. So I did go to a doctor, a general gynecologist and a DO, and she had a certified midwife that worked for her. And the certified midwife, she was there for my C-section with Sebastian, and I really wanted for her to deliver Matteo. She was very supportive of me attempting a VBAC, and she, I know, would do everything that she could to ensure that I would be able to have Matteo vaginally, which is what I wanted. And the provider that was actually on call, she was also another certified midwife. She works with a different doctor in our area, but she went to the same school as my certified midwife that I was seeing at the doctor's office. And so I called, and she called me back and said, okay, if you were 2 centimeters when you went earlier this week, I think that, you know, it's better safe than sorry. You have had a C-section. You do want to have vaginal delivery with this baby. Let's go ahead and get you in, get you monitored. Let's see what's going on and see if they are contractions, and then we'll go from there. So I said, okay. I got onto the patient portal for my doctor's office, and I messaged my certified midwife, and I said, I'm going into labor. I'm getting ready to go into the hospital. They told me to go ahead and come in. And that was it. So we load everything up, we get into the car, and of course it's 5 o'clock traffic. And the hospital is maybe only 15 or 20 minutes away, but with 5 o'clock traffic, it could be closer to a half an hour. And the busiest part of our city is obviously going to be downtown, and the hospital is very close to the downtown area. So my husband, of course, coming home from work, was starving. And we got into the car, and I said, I think my contractions are okay. If you need to, we can stop when we get to the corner of this street and this street, which was relatively close to the hospital. And as we progressed, my contractions started to get a lot worse. I think it probably took us 30 to 45 minutes to get to the hospital. We valeted the car, and we walked to something that they have called the OBECC, which is obviously OB for obstetrics, emergency care center. And everyone that is in that area of the emergency room is pregnant or 6 weeks, up to 6 weeks postpartum, you can still go into that part of the emergency room. So we go in, we get checked in. I see the provider that was on call. She said, we're gonna go ahead and get you into a room here shortly. So they get me all checked in, and they were waiting for a room. They were relatively busy at that time. And at this point, it's probably about 6:15 in the evening, and we're waiting. And because I had a C-section with my first son, I was one-on-one with my husband when I had him. And I really wanted to have that experience with Matteo as well. So I didn't want anyone to be there, and my mom said, I'm coming, I want to be there. And initially, I think that I had a little bit of reserve. I really wanted it to just be something with, you know, my husband and I, but my mom being there and showing up, I will say that it was a godsend, and I'm grateful that she was there, and I'll get into that in a little bit. So I'm pacing the hallway outside of the OBECC, waiting for a room, and I'm laboring in the hallway. And it's very reminiscent of when I had Sebastian. I was contracting the same way. I was in a lot of pain. I didn't want to be touched, and I was just kind of walking back and forth. And when my mom walked in to the side door there at the OBECC, she saw the pain that I was in, and she was upset that we hadn't been put into a room to actually be checked. So this is downstairs. This isn't in the mother-baby unit. This isn't anywhere relative to where I would be having the baby. This was just the emergency room part of it. So there was still a process to actually get me into the room, get me checked, and then at that point to transfer me. So my mom, being incredibly strong-willed, went back and said, my daughter needs a room now, or she's going to have this baby on the floor out in the hallway. So they get me into a room, and the provider that was on call comes in, and she's like, okay, we're gonna go ahead and, check your dilation. I said, give me 1 second. I was having an active contraction. And once it passed, she checked me, and I was 8 centimeters dilated. And at this point, it had been less than 2-3 hours since I had started contracting at home. At that point, my provider, my certified midwife, called the on-call and said, I'm on my way. I got her message through the portal. I'll be there soon. And I heard the on-call at that point. She said, she's 8 centimeters. We've got to get her upstairs. So they don't even move me beds. They don't wait for anything. They just said, tell me what room I need to go to. We need to go now. So the on-call provider and 2 of the nurses came with me, obviously my mom and my husband. And they took me up to the mother-baby unit where I was going to be having this child. And I was still contracting and I was in a lot of pain. And knowing at 8 centimeters and that you only need to get to 10 to have this child, I started to panic. And I looked at the on-call straight in the eyes and I told her, I am not having this child without an epidural. I need to have an epidural. I need for someone to give me the relief. I need to have an epidural. And she looked at me and she said, we're doing the best we can. If I could give it to you right now, I would. We have to call the anesthesiologist and make sure that their team can get here. So my certified midwife showed up. I was lucky enough to have 2 of them there. One to actually deliver the baby, which was my doctor that I had been seeing. And then the on-call, she was there and she was kind of coaching me through breathing. I was focusing on her as I was contracting. And I had my husband on my left side and then my mom was a little bit further down. And I'm contracting. And I probably had 5 or 6 contractions there while I was already upstairs in the mother-baby unit, and I kept begging and begging, and I broke down and I said, I cannot have this baby without an epidural. I had so much fear inside of me of pushing out this baby, knowing that he was this big coming out of a hole that's only this big. There was a lot of fear for me, and I knew there was no other option, that he had to come out of me. So my provider said, Chelsea, you're not going to have time to have an epidural. You can do this. You are strong enough to do this. Makes me emotional. And in that moment, I was so incredibly afraid. And my mom came over to me, and this was when I said, I was grateful that in the end that she was there. She said, you can do this. You are so incredibly strong. You can push this baby out. And in that moment, I knew I had to, I got to experience the joys of having a child and to be able to deliver him the way that we were made to, which is vaginally. And at that point, I just, I started to push. I had a couple of contractions. I pushed a few times, maybe 2 or 3 times. My water had broken at that point naturally. They'd wanted to check my dilation, and I knew that once my water broke, he was coming, he was ready. So after a few pushes, I started to feel like he was coming down. I did have a slight tear as he was coming out. And my certified midwife, kind of slowed me down, and she put a warm compress because I didn't have any sort of medication, any sort of painkillers, no epidural, nothing. And everyone was very encouraging, telling me to push. And it's really amazing to feel your body just naturally kind of takes over and you know what you're doing. And there were a few pushes initially that I had a lot of fear, and so I was holding back. And my certified midwife looked at me and she said, you've got to get him out of there. And so I started to push. She stopped me so that I didn't tear any more than I already had. And I looked up at my husband and he looked at me and he goes, he's right there. One more push and he's out. And I knew this was it. And I pushed him out and he came out weighing 6 pounds exactly. And he was 18 inches long, and he was the second perfect little boy that I got to bring into this world. And it was just absolutely amazing to have the support of my husband and my mother. and to have, you know, 2 certified midwives that had a ton of experience in what they were doing and had a ton of faith in me being able to deliver this baby. And I'm grateful for, you know, my mother-in-law. She was here and was, you know, making sure that I was okay during the day when I was contracting, and then she ended up staying with Sebastian that night. So at 7:46 on May 17th, 2019, Matteo Xander Arietta was born. And it was just the most perfect thing ever. And I am so incredibly grateful that I did not have time to have the epidural. It, in hindsight, truly wasn't as bad as I thought that it could be. Obviously, I had fear of the tears, of the recovery, of what my body was going to do. And I'm grateful because I think that, you know, the tears that I had would have been worse if I wasn't able to feel anything and I was just pushing to get him out with an epidural. So I'm grateful that I did end up having a successful unmedicated Vbac. And my recovery was so much easier than having a C-section. I was able to get up almost immediately. I did have 2 small stitches, and I was fairly pain-free for the first, you know, little bit of the evening. And that was because, so when you use the restroom postpartum, they've pumped fluids through you. So they pumped in a complete bag of fluids through an IV for me, in the hopes that I would end up having an epidural. But that did not end up happening. So I had fluids in me, so the urine was not so acidic. So I didn't have any sort of pain or anything for the first about 24 hours or so, and we were able to leave the following day. So we came home on May 18th, and I think they released us probably about 8 o'clock. So it was a full 24 hours in the hospital. And the difference between my husband, the first time and the second time was just absolutely amazing. He, you know, has always been amazing with Sebastian, and for that first birth he was amazing, but also with the second one he was great too, very supportive of me having a Vbac because he knew that's what I wanted, and getting up and walking around as soon as I could. He was very supportive of that, and helping me, and, you know, being the rock of our family. It was just such an incredible experience. And Matteo initially was, when you have an epidural, the baby is kind of a little bit out of it, because they do also have, you know, they feel the effects of having an epidural. And Matteo, when he came out, didn't have any sort of, you know, epidural or anesthesia, anything like that. So he was wide awake, ready to go. So it was a little bit different, our stay in the hospital, but I'm incredibly grateful that we were able to come home after 24 hours and introduce him to Sebastian, and just have 2 beautiful baby boys, and I couldn't be more grateful. So that was my birth story of a successful unmedicated Vbac for Matteo. Leave any questions or comments down below, letting me know what you'd like to see in the future, if you've experienced a successful Vbac, if it's something that you're hoping to do in the future. Also, please make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. I'd love for you to be a part of the family and see more videos like this coming up in the future. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.